Thank you. Questions?
Yeah.
Oh, Senator Cruz.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairs. Doctor, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I mean, you're ordering up there. I would put insight as A, and just let me kind of take this through. I have not been part of the criminal justice system from the inside, but I am a person in recovery. Went into treatment in March 16th of 1986, so
wow.
That's how long it's been. But the thoughts, the process is pretty much the same for addiction or criminal behavior because you're in a different universe.
Yes.
Okay. And so I would say that the first step has got to be the insight until you realize that you're doing something different. You can't get motivated, and until you get motivated, no skills are going to help you. So don't we need to, as a first step, I mean, is there a way to identify those people who get it? I had been in treatment for 10 days, and I was madder than hell and didn't belong there. I had no problems. And then there was one class I went to that everything clicked.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
For me, I mean, everything clicked. And from then on, I was motivated like you wouldn't believe and went out and changed everything in my life. But until I had reached that point, none of the other things were going to work for me because I had been through several things before I got to that point. So I mean, if indeed we're looking at people who think differently and their universe is different, don't we have to, as step one, get them to the point where they fully understand
Right.
where they are?
Well, it actually comes from the stages of change research on how you begin evaluating, as you say, is somebody ready to change? And what you really discover is this. Motivation, what we're talking about on this piece of the puzzle is motivation. What we know typically about offenders as a subgroup is they're not really interested in changing.
Right.
So you have to figure out, and motivational interviewing is one of those techniques that's been developed and is promulgated around the country now as a specific tool to help people get engaged in a change process. In other words, acknowledge that maybe I could consider something. Because one of the inherent factors for most of these people is they don't believe they can change anyway. I mean, as you describe things, in their life, what they've been told is you're helpless, hopeless, and worthless, and you'll never amount to anything. Period. And so all of a sudden, and they've been approached before, because most of these people have visited some of our opportunities around the countryside, and they've been asked before, don't you want to do something different? Sure, and they go do it, and what happens? They get rearrested, reincarcerated, and in their mind, that just further confirms what they've been told before is, you'll never make it, you'll never amount to anything. I mean, that's really the unspoken message almost across the board is, you can't be anything. I mean, look at the data. The data pretty much 5 years after release, depending on which state you're from, the recidivism rates are awful darn high, confirming for most of these individuals who know more probably about our criminal justice system than we do. They go, well, shucks. In this state, only 10% of the people make it. Am I going to be one of those lucky 10? Probably not. So I might as well have as much fun as I can have when I get out until you catch me again and lock me up. Therein lies part of the dilemma we're dealing with is they make their decisions at such a low level threshold when we talk about decision making about right and wrong that they get stuck down here and they can't work their way out because, as you just said, it's not only motivation to engage. What you really described is also the motivation to maintain, which is never easy. It's kind of like when we're in a crisis, if you've ever been arrested, that's a crisis. And so what the data really shows on DWI offenders is, for a lot of people, the arrest itself is all the treatment that needs to be done. A lot of people just processing, getting dealt with those issues, they end up, you know, it's kind of like, this is never going to happen again. If I have a problem, I'm going to deal with it, da-da-da-da-da. And they never come back to the criminal justice system. On the other hand, what you find about that group that comes back time in and time out is what? There's other Axis 1 and Axis 2 issues that bring them back to the party. Because unlike what you're describing, they didn't get it. They didn't get the fact that maybe I might be the master of some of my own problem creation. Not all of it, but I am a contributor, if you will. And therein lies the struggle for our clientele specifically is not only do they have substance abuse, they have all these other issues that they bring to the party. And therein is the other, what I'll call the sadness is, dang, it's kind of like how many obstacles and challenges can I place before myself before I really undo myself, because once they get out of prison and they have a rap sheet, a portfolio as I call it, when they go present their portfolio to an employer, what does the employer say? I mean, it's kind of like, so where have you been the last 12 years? Sabbatical, studying, yes. I've been studying a new approach to interact with people. I mean, therein lies part of the dilemma with them is they kind of build more obstacles for themselves every time they go down. And each time kind of the weight gets heavier. So how do you interject, if you will, and say, well, you can change. But therein goes back to reentry is we've got to build models that allow them to not only start changing, but be able to sustain the change in a pro-social fashion, because one of two things happens that was pointed out to me very rudely years ago is people either engage in pro-social behavior to change and learn how to support themselves, or what do? They engage in criminal activity. I mean, there's only one of two ways, because one thing we know for certain about almost across the board this client population, they're not going to sit on a curb and starve to death. That is not how that's going to work out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. This was a fascinating discussion. I wonder if you could take your expertise and your research and comment on how we could use this information in the field of prevention. And I know when you were talking about the programs that didn't work, like Scared Straight, I get the sense that kind of program, for example, in our schools won't help. But based on what you've learned, what can we be doing at, for example, our K-12 schools and just in society to work on preventing people from getting into the system to begin with? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. It just so happens we've been involved in research for about 6 years on that, because there was a fellow in Montana and ran a high school up there that called us and said, Ken, you've worked with offenders, and if you can help offenders, surely you can help high school students. And I said, I'm not sure that's true, but we're willing to look at what are the differentials or the commonalities between those groups. Why is it some kids do better in school and others don't? Well, when you start sorting through the research in answer to your question, it goes back to problem-solving skills. It goes back to what we'll call the basic tenets of why some people persevere, others don't. And there's some hallmark issues within that unfortunately our school system no longer provides to students. There's not a course on good problem solving. Where are we supposed to learn problem solving skills? At home. And what we know about high-risk students, those who are causing the most entertainment in our schools, are the ones who have the least family support. And oftentimes those parents don't have good problem-solving skills, so they have no foundation to pass on. And so by not intervening, frankly, we've looked at programs. Is high school early enough? No. Is middle school? I mean, actually in Dallas, middle school students were doing heroin for $5 a pop. So when we talk about needing to intervene, it needs to intervene where? Along the system. It starts in elementary, where teachers begin to identify people who probably are going to develop some risk factors. I mean, actually, we have some pretty interesting research talking about who those folks are, but we never do anything with them. Then we wait to middle school, and when you interview teachers, as we've done over the last 5 years, it's always interesting because, you know, elementary goes, oh, thank heavens we've moved them on to middle school. It's no longer our problem.